See, if you were not big into movies in the 2000s, you probably missed the era when Matthew McConaughey was in everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Like if there was a rom-com that needed a love interest who was snarky and quick-witted, smart, intelligent, down-to-earth, swoon-worthy, and an absolute pain in the ass of the female lead, 9 times out of 10, they would cast Matthew McConaughey. It's how he got to be with Jennifer Lopez in The Wedding Planner, Sarah Jessica Parker in Failure to Lunch, Kate Hudson in Fool's Gold, which, to be honest, was more action comedy than romantic comedy, to be fair. But they did still work in a bit of romance, so it counts in my book, especially when you realize that they chose him and Kate Hudson specifically to reunite them after the success of How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, which, coincidentally, just in case you missed it, is the focus of today's video. Because yes, I'm still on the kick of doing rewatches of movies I enjoyed as a child/teenager, and it's How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days turn. And as I did my rewatch, let me tell you that your girl was stunned, flummoxed, shooketh at the audacity of this film. And no, it wasn't because the film tried to convince us that Catherine Hahn is not the absolute knockout bombshell that she is, nor is it the casual misogyny that was Matthew McConaughey's Ben referring to his female colleagues as hips and lips, or the fact that the film seemed to imply that his colleagues would absolutely not stand a chance at getting the account that they were fighting over if they weren't attempting to seduce their boss with every breath. Which, by the way, is something that is quite common in advertising. Not the attempting to seduce your boss bit, by the way, even though it happens, but more the sexism and the weaponization of sexuality to obtain certain benefits, whether it's from a boss or a client. And I say this as someone that worked in advertising for over a decade. It is a cesspool, and some agencies are way worse than others. No, the reason why I am just flabbergasted at the audacity of this film is because How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days actively tried to convince us that the bet that these two had was in any way proportional or on the same playing field. And I don't know about you, but that irritated me. Now, for those who have never watched the film before, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days is peak romantic comedy. We follow Kate Hudson's Andie Anderson, a writer for a popular women's magazine, Composure, as their it girl for their how-to articles. As the credits roll at the start of the film, we see that she's very hands-on in her approach. For example, her How to Talk Your Way Out of Getting a Ticket article was born from her actually having to talk her way out of getting a ticket. So for Andie, she's not just writing it, she's living the experience. And this, mind you, is very important to note. So please keep this in mind. Now, Andie, although she's really good at what she does, is desperate to cut her teeth on political pieces, as this is more what she desires to do and is more aligned to the degree that she got. But Composure is a magazine that is mostly filled with beauty, health, and love matters that concern women. And if you just thought, that sounds a lot like Cosmopolitan, you would be correct. Composure is basically an homage to Cosmo. And as I'm sure you can pretty much guess, Andie's desire to write about Tajikistan's political issues don't go well with her boss. But it does get us, the audience, to see her as quite an intelligent woman. That, coupled with Kate Hudson's gorgeous face, banging bud, and her love for basketball, specifically the New York Knicks, confirms that she's not only not like other girls, but she's a guy's girl. So in movie lingo and the wish fulfillment of a lot of straight men, she is the complete package. She's also a great, phenomenal friend, as we see her throw herself in the line of fire to save her friend, Michelle, who is played by Catherine Hahn, from having to deal with the humiliation of their very nosy co-worker writing about her recently failed relationship. Andie takes up the baton and offers to write the piece herself, but from the perspective of helping women who often do not know that certain things and actions that they do might be what is putting off their potential suitors and resulting in their failed relationships. It is a pitch her boss loves, and they agree that the title would be How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Now, Matthew McConaughey's Ben Barry, on the other hand, yes, people, whoever wrote the screenplay for this film was clearly a fan of alliteration. Big fan. But as I was saying, Matthew's Ben Barry, on the other hand, works in advertising and is looking to broaden his portfolio from the stereotypical beer and sports clients that he's been working with so far. To do this, he's been working hard to perfect his pitch to a potential client, the lure, who is a big spender and a maker of diamonds. And he does succeed in his efforts to have the lure bring the account to the agency he's working at. The problem, however, is that his boss has also cast him in the mode of only being good with beer and sports brands, and so wants to give the diamonds business out to Ben's colleagues, Judy Spears and Judy Green. Yes, the naming convention in this film is just a riot. Anyway, other than the very inappropriate change to that particular relationship between the Judys and their boss, who is clearly not beating the allegations that he's only giving these two women the account because they are actively flirting with him and not just because they are very competent women, there is a truth to the fact that with advertising, the focus is often on the existing portfolio that you've handled, and most bosses are often worried about giving a big client to a creative who's never ran any campaigns within that industry. Ben's way to prove to their boss that he's more than capable, however, is to pitch him a bet. Since the two Judys insist that only women will be able to market something as priceless and precious as diamonds to other women because they understand their fellow women better, well then, it would prove that he also understands women by making a bet. If he's able to get a complete stranger, a woman he's never met prior to that evening, to fall in love with him within 10 days, then that proves that he does know women and should be given the account. His boss agrees. The two Judys, who at this point had met Andie back when they visited Composure to talk about potential ad spaces within the magazines, thanks to their agency now having the Delaware account, basically work the situation where the girl that Ben sets his sights on to seduce is Andie. And this is the basic premise of the film, like maybe the first 15 minutes of an almost 2 hours movie. As you can tell, this film does bring on the drama as we see Andie pull out all the stops to basically drive Ben practically out of his mind so he can break up with her so she can write and conclude her article. Remember what I said at the start of the video about Andie needing to live the experience to properly write her columns? Ben, on the other hand, is pulling out all the stops so that he can make Andie fall in love with him so that he can win the bet and gain the account for his work. And this right here is why I consider this film an insult to our collective intelligence. Because the way the film frames this entire debacle and the premise of its story is that since both Andie and Ben are basically enacting their bets for the sake of work, they are both proportional in the hurt in which they've dealt to each other. And that, my dearest viewers, is a goddamn lie. That is the biggest lie and reach I have ever seen. Because what this film is trying so hard to convince us of is that Andie, who basically starts out her relationship with Ben by being her authentic self, she's funny, she's witty, the repartee that they have with each other, exquisite shit. Like, I swear, their banter on the night they first met, when Andie gives him the glimpse of who she truly is smoking. And is absolutely necessary to show how compatible they actually are, so that when Andie then brings out the big guns, when she starts methodically going through her list of the most outrageous things that women have done with and to their boyfriends that could potentially be a turnoff, we see it more as a scientific study, where she's putting together an hypothesis and using her experimentation to see if it would bring her to the conclusion that she was expecting when she set out to write the article, with the goal of educating her readers on what not to do if they don't want to lose their relationships. This is important because it shows that whilst Andie is also doing this for work, her work is to help other women like her friend Michelle, who just don't know what it is that they might be doing wrong that is serving as much of a turn-off for the men that they are interested in, be aware of these things. Compare that with Ben's plan, which was to basically turn on the charm to get a woman to fall madly in love with him within a time frame so that he can both have his ego massaged in a, yeah, I can get any woman I want way, and get a boost with work. And before you tell me that that isn't the case, trust me, with advertising, your portfolio as a creative would get you places. And the more diverse your portfolio is, the more it confirms to potential clients and employers that you have the range to tackle any client, product, or campaign that is thrown your way. And that is the secret to growth within the industry. It is why Ben so desperately needs that in, and to get that, he was willing to lie and manipulate his way into getting the girl to prove that he can, and in thus doing, get himself a bump at work. And before you also point out that, well, he fell in love with her too, I would say, yes, he did. Because it's Andie Anderson. You know, smart, funny, loves the Knicks, hot as hell, sexy as fuck, Andie Anderson. Who wouldn't fall in love? The question I want you to ask yourself, however, is, what if it wasn't Andie? What if it was someone else? A woman who is not as confident or self-assured or just the total knockout that Andie is? A woman he isn't as compatible with? Would Ben have said that because they really aren't in alignment with one another and he doesn't foresee a future with their relationship, that he's going to do the decent thing by sending her off and not following through on the bet to make her fall in love with him? We both know that the answer to that is a big, ginormous no. Him falling for Andie just as she falls for him is a case of Ben being able to both have his cake and eat it too. He gets to win the bet, secure the account, and get the girl. When Ben expresses his anger after the truth is revealed, it is to tell Andie that she basically played with his mind, made him think that he was losing his marbles, because the Andie he met on the first day is drastically different from the Andie that he met on subsequent days afterwards. Remember, all of this takes place within 10 days. Of course, there is absolutely no mention of the fact that the illogical Andie, who seemed to live to throw him off for a loop every time they met, was not the Andie that showed up at Staten Island to meet his family, which was the point where she eased off on her outlandish plots, because that was the point where she actively realized that she really was falling for him. Now, Ben is pissed at Andie, basically making him the case study for her article, and that is what he throws in her face when she is furious at him that he made a bet that he could get any woman, i.e. her, to fall in love with him. She's angry and humiliated that everything she felt and thought that she was experiencing with him was all curated in order to serve the purpose of him winning the bet and getting his client. He was playing with her and her emotions, actively trying his best to get her to fall in love with him, because the love of a woman can easily be sacrificed at the altar of his own ambition and ego. The film tries to convince us that these 2 points of anger for the characters are proportional. Like, we cannot reason that whilst Ben's ego is bruised, there really isn't as much pain to be found at the discovery that the person you were dating back when she looked like she had multiple personality disorder isn't really dealing with BPD, but was instead just actively trying to get you to break up with her so she can write all about it in an article as a how-to guide for other women to not repeat her mistakes. Because I don't know about you, but Ben's anger, whilst valid, because yeah, she did mess with him, is not the same and cannot be put on the same level as Andie's rage. He's upset because his ego is bruised. She is devastated because her heart is broken. If he hadn't fallen for her, what he was doing was just merely creating an experience, a false persona to cause her to fall in love with him for a game that he wanted to win, and then he would break up with her and devastate her, probably with one of those "it wasn't you, it was me" line that we never really believe anyway, because our brains tend to fixate on what we could possibly have done wrong and what mistakes we made, and that poor woman would never have known that it really was his jackass self, and she was just a means to an end to getting the job he wanted. And don't get me started on how the movie ends, because we have Andie basically humble herself and pull off a public confession where she admits that she did end up falling in love in the course of an article that was meant to have served another purpose. It is both a confession and pseudo apology to Ben, and that is what he reads and then comes running back to her, which for me is something that adds to the irritation. Because prior to everything blowing up in their collective faces at the company ball when the truth is revealed, Ben doesn't really show any sort of hesitation about what he's doing, and how maybe him playing with Andie's heart for a bet, which wasn't what was happening at that point. Of course, the film does show us the two characters falling in love, so we know that their hearts had gotten tangled in it. But it did start off as a bet, and we never got to see him show any hesitation or guilt about that. And no, him getting her tickets for the Knicks game 2 days after the ball does not a sign of hesitation or guilt show. It is just him believing that he would have gotten to eat his cake and have it too, i.e., the account in the bag and the girl on his arm. Andie, however, actively feels bad about it and tries to get out of having to continue writing the article. The only reason she isn't able to is because her boss insists. The ad spot has been paid for and the cover page had been printed, which meant that Andie has no choice but to deliver on it. But even if she isn't able to not go through with writing the article, at least she shows some remorse. We get diddly squat from Ben. And instead, what we have as an ending is him racing after her with their love friend in tow, which, not gonna lie, I really liked. What can I say? I am a sucker for a good romantic chase scene. After the groveling scene, the I need to make it to her and tell her how I feel before she leaves my life forever chase scene is my absolute second favorite scene in romance stories. I live for that. But as I was saying, he races after her with their love friend in tow, and after the outpouring of her love for him, that was basically the article she wrote, which we can definitely take as a confession. His own confession is to call bullshit on her saying that she's headed to Washington because that is where she can write what she wants to write. And there I was, watching that scene, shocked at the audacity of this man. Because one, we don't actually get a confession from him as well. Like, you can go and rewatch the scene right now. His ass doesn't actually confess to her. He calls bullshit, which is their thing since they went to see his family at Staten Island and they kiss. And two, what do you mean bullshit on her going to Washington? That is cool. Like, I am shocked at the audacity of this film. Because Ben gave us nothing. My guy gave us absolutely nothing. We got the chase but no declarations. Just that smirking ass grin, and the writers just had her roll over. And all I could say is, you're damn lucky you were so hot, Matthew McConaughey. Because if you weren't, you would have been decked for sure. Other than that, though, I do think if you haven't seen it yet, you should check out How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. It is funny. It is entertaining. Kate and Matthew have incredible chemistry together. And you definitely should see it, if anything, just to watch the sheer horror on Ben's face when Andie calls his penis Princess Sophia. But yeah, tell me. Have you seen How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days? Did you buy into the bullshit? Because I did the first time around, so it's okay. Although in my defense, I was a teenager when it dropped, so I wasn't looking at it with the same adult lens I have on now. Hit the like button if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet. Share this video if you want. Support me on Patreon if you can. And until tomorrow's video, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.